Hey, this is Videobob. This is another Prevost video. So we're in the driver's compartment of my 1990 Prevost XL. This coach was built by Angola, but it almost doesn't matter who built the bus because every single one of them do it different. And even Angola, I've looked at different ones and they're different every time. So I see a lot of new owners, they'll get the thing and they don't have the manuals. And they're asking, they come on the forums, I'm one of the administrators on the Prevost Owners Group on Facebook, and they'll come on and they'll say, there's all these lights and buttons, I don't know what they are, what they do. So I'm going to try to go over a couple of the basics, because some of these things aren't labeled. Now up here you have a row of indicators, and I'll try to explain what some of them are. Alright, right now you'll see level low is flashing. That just means your air pressure is not up to where it should be. Once it gets, matter of fact, I feel my seat rising. I have an air seat. Once it gets to enough air, that'll pop up. But that'll also be on if you have your wheels raised. Now this yellow light, which is kind of hard to see, shows a wheel up in the air. That's your tag axle. Your tag axle is the wheel all the way in the back. That's a single wheel, not a double. And what that is there for is when you're on the highway, you want to have that wheel down, and it helps with the stability of the ride. But the reason you want to lift it is maybe you're making a sharp turn, you're making a U-turn, you're backing a trailer or something. You want to raise those wheels up so that you just have the two. It makes it much easier for the bus to turn, because when the rear is swinging, those tires are dragging. So when you're making a sharp turn, you want to lift them up. Now your raising lever could be in a couple of different places. Mine is right back here. You don't need to see it, but it's right back here. There'll be a lever, and my lever, like if I can put the wheels down. Watch this, and the bus may jump a little, but it didn't move. So there, the wheel is down, and then I can raise it. So the way the wheels work is that there's springs, and the springs pull them up and let the air out and raise them up. I'll tell you another handy time to raise them is when you're going through a tool booth. So now I'm 4 wheels. Those wheels are in the back or down. Save you a couple bucks. I've done that. Okay, then you have a couple of, you've got this 1 and a 2. You're just going to have to check your manual because those are engine warnings. This is an emergency hazard. That should be easy to figure out. The triangle, it flashes, flashing your blinkers. When this, there's not a left and a right blinker. There's just one signal indicator that blinks. So you just have to know which one is on. And of course that's your bright lights, flash, bright. You've got a battery telling you that you have a low battery. Then you have a few other indicators that could be anything. And I can't really see what some of these are, so I can't really comment on them. That's really going to be for getting your manual. You're probably never going to see any of these lights, hopefully, if you're lucky. Over here you see a gas tank, and what this is indicating is water in your fuel. Diesels have a problem with condensation water in the fuel. That light comes on. There's a procedure of draining your water filter to get the water out. But you should make it a good habit of putting in diesel conditioner, anti-gelling conditioner, anti-mold, things like that. Keep your diesel fresh. But if you're constantly using the bus, or at least using it pretty often, that's something that you won't have to do. These other indicators are just for your lights. That's a fog light. These are the running lights. My little bulb is out there. That's headlights. This is a backup horn, on or off, or backup beeper. So let's say you're in a neighborhood, you don't want to wake everybody up. You can turn that on and you won't hear the beep, beep, beep like a garbage truck. Most people disconnect it anyway. It's a pain in the ass. This over here you'll see, you're going to hear a click. It's a key with a picture of a door. It says door locks. So the Prevost, just like the Greyhounds, things like that, they've got an air cylinder ram over there by the door that locks the door. And that's just a secondary form of security, but it also pulls the door in a little extra tighter than the normal deadbolt does. Like when I release it, it pulled it in pretty good, but if you were going down the road, you would hear air coming through that door. When you lock it, it pulls it in tight because it's a wedge-shaped ram. that goes in there. And the great thing about that is if you really wanted to, if you were crafty enough, you could hook up a wireless remote control to that RAM and have it lock and unlock your doors. Now on the other side, I can't really show you, but there's always lots of different things. This one has 3 buttons, and like I said, I can't see them from here, but I'll just describe what they are. There's one that says RPM. What RPM does is, if you can listen carefully, I don't know if you can hear this, the motor will jump up to, this one runs at about 1,100, 1,200 RPMs. The older coaches previous to the Detroit 60 series, the 8V92s, or the 6V92s, they don't like the low idle. It creates a low pressure, and actually they run too cold. So they recommend that if you're going to be sitting for a while or whatever, you should have your idle high. Also, if you're trying to build up the air in your tanks, it comes in handy. So that's the high RPM. Now, since we're in a high heat, humid climate of Dallas, we don't really need to use that. There's also an ether button, something I'll never use. In the back is a bottle of ether that runs into the injection system. So for those people that live up in the Great White North in Canada, where it's 40 below, you can give yourself a little squirt of ether. This has never been used in this coach. I don't think there's any ether in there. You'll probably never use it either. And then we have an override button. Now, it's got kind of a picture of a piston, and it's red, and it says override. If you're ever in a situation where your engine goes into auto shutdown because of low coolant, low oil pressure, high oil temperature, or any other failure, well, if your motor shuts off on you, you now have no power steering, nor can you move. So if you're in the middle lane of a highway and you're having a major problem and your engine is going into shutdown mode, you are in big trouble. So by holding down the override button, you can keep the motor running and steer. You might have to make the decision that it's worth blowing up your engine to not roll the bus off a cliff. So that's what that's there for. Then you're going to find other switches all over the coach that have to do with the coach manufacturer. I recently had a buddy of mine who bought a same year model coach as this one, and he had a switch that said MAC on it. And he couldn't figure out what that was. Well, what it stood for was Macerator. A lot of these coaches have marine toilets, like mine. Mine has a Raritan. It's basically a garbage disposal for your poo. So you press a button and it goes like a garbage disposal, grinds it all up into a puree, puts it in the tank. Well, what that button does, sometimes they'll put that on the output, and your waste will be mostly solid until it is being outputted. That also creates a pressure system. So there are some coaches that have been hooked up with a Macerator system where you could hook up a garden hose instead of the 3-inch hose, because everything's pureed into a fine liquid and it goes out easier. On mine, I had this button that said open and close. It didn't say what it did. I found out the hard way. Open means on the right side by the back wheels is a separate hydraulically operated valve that releases both the black and gray water at the same time. You probably heard a story of many years ago about the Dave Matthews bus accidentally opened up their valve on a bridge, and it poured down onto the people below. Well, that's what that switch is. Comes in real handy for tailgaters, people who like to ride in your blind spot, stuff like that. No, you're not allowed to do that out in public. But what that's for is, there are maybe situations where if you had your gray water, you can dump a gray water but not a black water. This coach has a gray water bypass. So if, like a lot of entertainer buses, like the bands use, there's a no poop rule on the bus. But you can wash hands and pee and whatever. And you can dump that out the back. Nobody's going to complain about that. It's just dishwater. We can talk about some of the gauges, but quite frankly, if you don't know what these gauges are, you really don't need to be behind the wheel of one of these things. People ask, can I legally drive one of these? You should have what's called, for private use in Texas, it's called a non-commercial Class B. You want to at least have an air brake certification for one of these. But for anything over 26,500 pounds, you have to have a special certification to drive. And this coach is 42,000 pounds. And you would know what these gauges are. You've got two separate air gauges. You've got your fuel. You got your battery power. These two down here are the water and the oil pressure for the generator, speed, RPM, your turbo pressure, your water temperature, your oil temperature for your transmission, your oil temperature for your engine, and your oil pressure. But here's something that you probably won't see in a lot of the books. It's called a pyro gauge. A pyro gauge measures the temperature of your exhaust. Why that's important is, let's say you're trucking up a hill in the middle of Utah or something. You start running 1,300 degrees, you're going to catch on fire. So you're going to want to know to ease off and go slow. So the pyro gauge here, it usually doesn't get above 9 for me. I've never seen it get over there. But that's 900 degrees. So this is a twin pyro gauge because it's a V8 and it's checking the manifolds of both sides. And that's something that you won't find on most trucks. Most truckers have never seen a pyro gauge. This is sort of an old school thing because they kind of did away with that with the Series 60 systems. Now this is AC power. You see inverter switches. We don't use those anymore. You have this double switch that is for the docking lights, and not all coaches have these. The center being off, the top being on, which turns on the docking lights on each side, and the bottom are temporary lights, so that whenever I turn on my blinker, like if you look out the window there, you'll see when I turn the blinker on, see that spotlight comes on with the blinker, or I can turn them on and leave them on if I was docking. That's what that's for. Some of these other lights are the Vista lights. That's these LEDs that I've put all over the coach. We'll show those. Camera lights, those are for the camera. If you look on my screen here, you'll see that lights up. I put there's fog lights back there that light up the camera, so when you're backing. Also good for tailgaters. Then you have your AC heat control. Now AC will be green, and it's not lighting up because the compressor's not coming on yet. And then heat would be red, and again, it's not coming there. So, or it's yellow actually, or it's green. It should have a red indicator there. That's a pretty bad example there. But anyway, so that you can't run both at the same time. You can run AC or heat. That's what we call the over-the-road bus air. You may or may not have that. There's a lot of coaches that were made without over-the-road heat and air, and they only have the air conditioners. This one has both, which is great. You're also going to see some things called a pager and whatnot. Now, if your coach was built with an intercom system, that's what that's for. You've got driver fan, driver therm, fresh air recirculate, driver floor. That's all pretty obvious stuff. Now, this was a really goofy thing my coach builder did. They put the controls for the mirrors way over here, but I think that's because they probably added the remote mirrors later. Pretty bad spot to put them, but sometimes coach builders do that kind of goofy stuff. Here, you have your backup camera system. These people had installed some switches for the speakers so that when you turn on the speakers, you could control whether or not they were just up front or in the back. These are all specific to this particular coach. Now, way over here on this panel are some other things we'll talk about. Here is your shift computer for your transmission. Pretty obvious. Reverse, neutral, drive, 1, 2, 3, 4. You may need to shift down. You're going down a hill, you want to shift down. This is your Jake brake. Has on and off, low and high. A Jake brake at the Jacobs brake, also known as an engine brake, uses the compression of the motor to help slow you down. If you're going down a mountain road, you're rolling down, and you don't want to burn up your brakes, you use the Jake brake. Now, you'll see these signs that truckers have to observe that say, no Jake brake in the city, whatever, because they're normally very loud. But on a bus, you can't hear the thing at all, so don't ignore those signs. All right, you got a couple of switches over here. You got this picture of a driver with the sun over his head. That's this light here. Now, this one is funny. I don't even get a good shot of that. My friend asked me, goes, what is this? It's a circle with squiggly lines. That is the mirror heater. It's a mirror with a heater in it. Then you have cruise on and off. That's pretty simple. Now, the writing on these buttons is going to be wiped off because people touch them all the time. This is your cruise operation. The white one is decelerate. That cancels your cruise control. The first one is a set. Second one is resume. So with cruise on, providing it's working, once you get to the speed you want, you press set, and that will set your cruise speed. If you hold it, it will slowly decelerate you. Once you've canceled it or hit the brake, either one, you can hit the resume button and it will resume that speed. You can also hold the resume button and increase your speed. Over here is your Prevost level low system. This is how you level a coach. So when you park, the key must be on, engine must be running, you want to have full air, and with this dial, the dial in drive position should be pointed at drive. That would be drive position, which you're going to feel the bus is going to start leveling now. What that does is automatically levels all of the bags to the right area. Now see, you can't tell on camera, but the bus is moving right now. It's lifting up on this side and raising up. This bubble is going to start moving. Now, since we're parked on a slight slope and I want the bus to lean that way, we're going to point it towards left and then press the down, and the bus is going to go down that way. Now, only a little bit because we just, moved it just a tad. And then if I wanted to raise up that side, I could point it here and go up, and it'll raise up on this side. And then if I wanted to raise up the front, or I could lower it. So we just dropped 6 inches there. So now I'm going to raise it back up a little bit. And you can look at your level bubble, and it's usually pretty accurate. That was put in by the factory. But sometimes what I'll do is I'll buy one of those really big levels, and I'll put it on the floor if you're really crazy about it. But it's close enough. So that's the basic Prevost system. You could probably get a manual for your coach from Prevost, and usually people are pretty good about keeping the manuals for these things, but there's always not always a good explanation for all this stuff. I'm going to go ahead and also your main brake. My main brake is back here to the back. There will be a mushroom switch you pull up for your main brake, but sometimes they're in different places. Sometimes they're over here. If you get an old Greyhound or a passenger coach, they're going to have a little bit different stuff on it. But that's some of the basics of the Prevost Dash. I'm sure I probably left some things out. I'm sorry I didn't answer all of these, but this is the basic information to get you going down the road. If you have a particular engine flashing problem or something, if you're a member of Facebook, please join the Prevost Owners Group. I'm Bob. I'm one of the administrators there, and I'll be happy to answer and look up any questions that you have. Anyway, this is the 1990. It didn't change a whole lot for a long time, but the reason I'm doing this video on this particular coach is, hey, this is the one I got, and this is one that's really popular. It's probably one that you're going to find, that it didn't change for a lot of years. So I hope you learned something. Please subscribe to the videos, and I'm Videobob. Stay tuned, more to come.